My family is very enmeshed. I didn't quite understand boundaries. And apparently I had actually started self-injuring when I was 3 or 4, and I had big bruises on myself. My parents were actually worried that someone was going to think that they were hurting me. And so that was the first instance that I ever had heard that I had self-injured. It was like I was trying to make myself fit into this environment that was very structured and very, you do it this way and you don't ask questions and that's just how it is, and I'm not that type of person. Part of the self-injury was trying to make myself fall in line. I've been diagnosed with a dissociative disorder, and part of that was I had to allow myself to break off a little bit so that I could continue to be in that environment without getting repercussions from them. I was my own jailer. I started with breaking plastic and just scratching myself. And then I had tried burning. When one of my classmates actually committed suicide in 9th grade, I realized that I was going down a dangerous path. And so I talked to someone, and at that point they had mentioned that they weren't going to tell my parents at this point, but if I didn't stop, they would have to have a conversation with them. So I stopped cutting per se, but then I started punching walls, and I actually did a lot of damage through my wrist and hands. I had no way of saying I'm really angry at this or I'm really hurt, because a lot of times the reaction was grow up or very shaming, and so there was a lot of anger. There was a lot of I need to survive, and that was how I did it. I shut everything down, but it had to come out at some point. And then between my junior and my senior year, I went into therapy of my own accord. But she didn't really understand borderline personality disorder. She definitely didn't understand cutting. She actually made a number of comments about masochism, and I'm so not masochistic. So it was really kind of frustrating. Masochism is where you actually get a sexual type of pleasure out of pain. Someone with borderline personality disorder or a trauma disorder, they often keep everything inside. And you can only do that for so long before the steam starts coming out of the pressure cooker. And then eventually the pressure cooker is going to blow up if you don't let the steam out. So that's where cutting comes in. It's the ability to let some of the steam out so the entire pot doesn't explode on you. I actually don't feel the pain until I start to heal. What happens when I cut is it's like this euphoric feeling, almost like what people describe as doing drugs. It's this short-term high. And you're like, oh, everything is good with the world. And then, unfortunately, again, like drugs, when you do it, every time you have to up the ante. The interesting thing is my current therapist, she's wonderful when it comes to trauma. She actually kind of explained something to me that she's not entirely worried about the cutting, because as I'm working to move past the trauma, it will become no longer helpful. It will become no longer helpful for me to do it. And she's right. It is significantly less helpful, which adds to my frustration, but then it also gives me an opportunity to learn and grow how to deal with my emotions. I actually have post-traumatic stress disorder, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, there we go. And it was because of the environment growing up. And in addition to that, I was sexually assaulted a number of times because and that was one of the things I hated myself for. Once my no was ignored, I couldn't reinforce it. So I would say, no, I don't want to. And then, if they just pulled up my shirt a little bit more or did something sexual, again, I would just shut down and endure it, so that way I wasn't getting hit, I wasn't getting choked. It's all kind of compounded into this mass, like, hairball that I can't find my way out of. But thankfully, my therapist, she talks about how she's at the top of a tree and she can see out, she can see the whole picture, whereas I'm stuck in the mess. And so I'm really excited to see what could come of it, but the idea of kind of going through the mess is very scary. It's crazy because one of my best friends, and we became really close, and I took a whole bunch of Tylenol at one point, and this time I didn't have the oh shit mechanism. I wanted to die. The issue is I had asthma, and because Tylenol shuts down your body, I couldn't breathe. And that freaked me out. Even though I wanted to die, I just wanted to be gone. I didn't want to feel everything shutting down. And it was fate. Somehow she answered the phone, and I know she's a busy woman, and so I don't know. She answered it, and she was the one that called 911. I could finally see that I was worth something, that someone thought I was worth something. I'm actually here for a reason. I'm a positive in the world. I'm supposed to be here for something. And the great thing is I've noticed recently that the voice of reason, the voice of I want to live, is getting a lot stronger. I can see the sunlight. And I've graduated college. One of the biggest issues I had in finding a therapist is I would be told, in therapeutic talk, of course, that I was too crazy for them. I went to, 3 or 4 therapists, and so I couldn't even get my needs met. I went to another therapist, and, therapy talk, I can't help you. You're too crazy. Another psychologist, this is a psychologist, she actually said, I don't really believe in that disorder. I was like, yeah, you obviously don't specialize in trauma. And by the end of the conversation, she said, yeah, I don't have the tools to help you, i.e., you're too crazy for me. I then went to the other recommendation that my therapist had made, and she had me rehash all of my trauma right away. And at the end of the session, she didn't close it enough that I didn't feel like I was a gaping wound. My current psychologist works with complex trauma. She works with a number of people that have, painful paths, and she's kind of explained that, helped me understand that borderline personality disorder is almost always tied in with trauma. And one of the things that I've noticed, when other people talk about their crazy family members or their crazy friends, is that they really don't see the pain. Is all they see are these people who are trying to make their lives crazy. They don't have the skills to communicate, I need help. And so they can manage on some level chaos because that's what they grew up in. That's what they understood, and that was normal for them. And now that they're older and in the natural environment, they aren't able to, so they make everything chaotic because they understand chaos. And so you try and tell the people, well, there's more behind it. You need to realize that this person makes chaos so they can survive. And the more you help them, the more they're going to make it chaotic. It's like you're entering a formula for algebra, and they're entering, and they're reading back Spanish. And there's no way for, the connection to be made without a lot of treatment. And dialectical behavioral therapy is the place to start. It's where I learned emotions. It's where I learned that I have the right to say no. It's also where I learned that I have the right to ask for my needs. Even if it's not a full DBT program, if there's a skills group that teaches people interpersonal skills, it teaches them emotion regulation, and it teaches mindfulness, it's definitely helpful. And periodically, I would go back to the group because that's what I needed. Yes, I need the interpersonal skills. Somatic experiencing is at least new to me, way of releasing trauma. Well, it's the idea that we don't, because we're cognizant of the pain and we don't want the pain, so we just kind of stuff it in a little box and we put it in a closet and we don't, in our mind, and don't deal with it. Well, our bodies still need to deal with that. My current therapist, she's teaching me somatic experiencing as well as integrating it with EMDR, which I have no idea what that stands for, but I know that it takes your trauma and it unburies it and kind of dusts it off and opens it up and lets you look at it, and it makes it so it's non-threatening. I'm actually making boundaries and keeping them. I have decided that I don't want to spank my children, and I don't want anyone else to spank my children. And so I had to make that boundary and make it established, and I had to do it with almost every member of my family just because that's how we were raised. And it's fine that they do that, but that's not how I want to raise my daughter. So I have to keep enforcing that boundary. And actually, I've noticed it's so much easier to make boundaries for my daughter than it is for myself. And she's my daughter, and so it's my job to protect her, and that's what I'm doing. Now I need to get that into my head that, I need to care for myself. I actually did that once, or a number of times right before my surgery. I had to insist on getting my needs met because the surgery, without it, my back pain would have never gone away. Actually, my entire body pain would have never gone away. And so I had to insist on taking care of myself. When people talk about manipulation, I always go back to something I was told about how if you're in a class and someone's lecturing to you, technically they're manipulating you. If you read something that someone has written that's an opinion, or even not, because no one's writing is unbiased, they're manipulating you. And so for someone to say, I don't like this person because they manipulate me, I don't enjoy, they just kind of egg me on or try to make me angry. And no one is really trying to make you do anything. They're trying to get their needs met. And ultimately, it's your job to make sure that you don't get injured. But it's their job to try and figure out a way to get their needs met. And the discussion should not be, why is this person manipulating me? It should be, what does this person need that they're asking for? How can I help you? What is it you actually want? And if you stop and say, okay, it's not about me, it's their issue, let's ask them. If you want to help them, you need to ask them what they want. Not run from them, not call them manipulative. Ask them how you can help. I was being told, granted, the way I was being told was backhandedly. I was, when people try to commit suicide, they're just trying to manipulate you. And the thing is I was in a situation that I couldn't control. I needed to get control of something in my life. And because I couldn't control it and I was in so much pain, I did want to die. It wasn't my trying to manipulate someone to pay attention to me. It wasn't even caring if the people that were overrunning my life knew about it. It was, I need something that I can control. And that's what cutting was too. The cutting, I could control the hurt. No one could hurt me more than I could hurt myself. And so every time I would do it, it was like putting something back in my hand. The hard part about that was I also realized eventually cutting was controlling me. And so I lost that control. But I mean, the chaos is so immense that you have to control something, even if it's yourself. And if you feel like you can't, that's where the suicide came in. And it wasn't my way of saying, you suck, I hate you. It was my way of expressing, I believe, it was my way of expressing that I was in a lot of pain. I had a lot of frustrations when it came to dialectical behavioral therapy, because part of the basic of that is that you cannot address much beyond the self-harm or the suicidal ideation, because you need to have that out of the way before they're willing to move on. Unfortunately for me, it's so tied in with the trauma, I really couldn't stop it. I would go for 80 some days and I would be counting every day, trying to make it through. And then I just couldn't anymore. And my therapist at the time could not move on because she was a DBT therapist. And so we never, until like the last year, we never really got to work on the trauma. And my current therapist, she's amazing. She's like telling me that it's a secondary thing. And so let's work on the primary. Let's work on the pain, and then your pain that you have to take out on yourself, or that you feel your worthlessness is going to leave because you don't have that pain, the base pain any longer. For me, my life currently it's really amazing. I never imagined that I would actually live past 25. I'm 29. I have an amazing 2-year-old daughter. I graduated from college. I'm looking at my future. And while it's still very difficult to look at tomorrow, the future that is, that I can see 5 years from now is so gorgeous. And it's because I've been willing to put in the time. And I know that it's going to be painful. And I know that some days I'm not going to want to do it. And some days I don't want to get out of bed. And some days the idea of movement is, almost beyond, it's unfathomable to see myself going forward and being productive, and instead of just sitting in front of my TV, cuddling my daughter. But yet I do it because it's working, because I'm here and I'm alive, and somehow I've made it this far. I can make another step. Probably the greatest thing that I have realized is I'm not nothing. I don't have to be molded. I don't have to be changed. And so it's so wonderful that I can raise my daughter up knowing that her spirit is beautiful and that she doesn't need to be broken. And like you break a horse, her spirit doesn't need to be broken so that she behaves well. Her spirit needs to be encouraged and flourished so that she can grow. And I'm realizing that I need to do that for myself.